We're going to learn now Le'ili Nishmas Imi Morasi Tomorezel Pas Mordechai Tzvi Le'ili Nishmas Avi Mori Aaron Ben Yisachar Le'ili Nishmas Achi Hayokar Aaron Yehuda Ben Aaron. Rabbi Oba mentioned in Parshas Yisro a very interesting observation. There's a machlokes as to whether or not the story of Yisro coming to Klal Yisrael occurred before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah. But he asked an interesting question. Even according to the Man Damar, that Parshas Yisro, the beginning, where Yisro comes to join them in the Midbar, came after Matan Torah. Why did the Torah put it in there before Matan Torah? And an interesting answer is that the Parshas of Shovavim, which we're just completing now with Mishpatim, have the most dramatic story in history. Shibud Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kabbalas HaTorah al Har Sinai. The climax or the drama of the onset of this story, which was Shibud Mitzrayim, is climaxed with Matan Torah. But the climax is not Matan Torah. The climax is Parshas Mishpatim. Parshas Mishpatim is the real climax of the Shovavim Parshios. Why? We had to have Matan Torah before Mishpatim, because Mishpatim is our real Torah. All the halachas, we've been learning stories until now, reading about stories and stories and stories, and they're very important. Ma'aseh B'Sim Labanim. It's starting time to learn Torah now. Now we're going to learn about the Shomim. Now we're going to learn about Eved Ivri. We're going to learn about all of the halachas that Parshas Mishpatim is famous for. Halachas of Nezikin, halachas of all the other aspects of mamonos, of our daily life, which is so critical for a Yid to distinguish himself as a Yid. But we can only do Parshas Mishpatim only if it's preceded by Har Sinai. And the question is, how can we get to Har Sinai? Only if it is preceded, according to Rabbi Olbaum, by the story of Yisro. Because the Parsha of Yisro, with Moshe Rabbeinu graciously accepting Yisro into Klal Yisrael and treating him with the greatest kavod, teaches us an important lesson, a critically important lesson, the lesson of Midos. Before you have Torah, you have to have Midos. A requirement, an absolute requirement for Matan Torah is to first be Makabel, the Parsha of Midos. We have to have the proper Midos. This interesting story, gotten from Rav Kanievsky, illustrates this in Parshas Mishpatim. It happened that the two children were becoming bar mitzvah on the same Shabbos. Happened to be Parshas Yisro. The father of each of these boys made sure to inform the Gabbai of their shul that his son intended to learn the Parsha on the Shabbos of his bar mitzvah, as is customary in many communities. Unfortunately, the Gabbai was only human, and when the second father approached him, he forgot that the first father had already reserved that Shabbos. When the bar mitzvah was only a few short weeks away, the Gabbai realized his error. What could he do? Both boys had put in months of preparation, learning the words and shrub of their parsha, and were eager to perform, but they couldn't both learn. With no choice, the Gabbai called both bar mitzvah boys and their fathers to a meeting. He revealed his mistake and apologized profusely. Now, however, he said, I am stuck with a dilemma. My apologies cannot create the possibility for both of you to learn the same parsha on the same Shabbos. I cannot decide between you, so please come up with a solution on your own. The first boy immediately stood up and said, I am prepared to allow my friend to learn Parshas Yisro. It is true, my father reserved this Shabbos first. I'm willing to forego my rights and prepare Parshas Mishpatim instead. Pretty impressive within a couple of weeks. Despite the work he had already invested in preparing Yisro, he allowed his friend's needs to take precedence. A few years later, the first boy's mother became ill and had to be hospitalized. The doctors tried to treat her, but they could not. Despite all of their efforts, diagnosed the root of her illness, her condition worsened and worsened. Her children took turns staying with her so she would never be alone in the hospital. And the young hero of our story also took his turn, sitting at her bedside, repeating the holy words of Tehillim, beseeching Hashem to heal his mother. It so happened that a certain famous Rav, who we know now was Rav Yoshev, was also admitted to the hospital for treatment during that time. His disciples arranged to have a world-famous specialist flown in from the United States to supervise his care. Since he would be remaining in a hospital over Shabbos, minyanim were arranged. It was Parshas Mishpatim, and the boy offered to Elaine, as he remembered the parsha from his bar mitzvah preparations, and would be staying with his mother that Shabbos. After davening, the Rav approached the boy to thank him for his laning. In the course of the conversation, he realized that the boy's mother was suffering from a disease similar to his own. So he asked that the specialist who had been brought in for his care take the time to examine her and see if he could help. Indeed, Hashem granted this physician the ability to discern that which had been hidden from the other doctors. He was able to prescribe treatments that soon restored her, Baruch Hashem, to full her health and allowed her to return home to her grateful family. All because a young boy who was ready to forego his due so that his friend would not suffer. It was a fabulous story. It's pretty well known. I'm happy to say to those of you who have not heard it before, and those who have not heard it, who have heard it before and heard it again, I'm sorry, it's a great idea to hear it one more time. Good Shabbos.